Welcome back. We will continue with our last session called Building a Fire-Resilient Future for Heritage, Policy Coherence and Cross-Sectoral Cooperation. This session will be moderated by Yuri Peshkov, Program Specialist for Culture, UNESCO Office in Kingston, Jamaica. We would like to greet our panelists, Muhammad Al-Absi, Disaster Risk Management Specialist, ISESCO, Nicole Grenadich, Disaster Risk Management Specialist, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, Keping Ma, Director of the Center for Northwest Asian Biodiversity Research, and Counselor of South and East Asia. Also, Mr. Max Oft, Policy Officer, Bureau of Association of Indigenous Village Leaders, who will be joining us online. Please remember that after the presentations from our panelists, we will have a Q&A session. Yuri, the floor is yours.
Let me invite distinguished panelists to the floor. Thank you. Please. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, participants, so welcome to this final session. Indeed, it's a final session of our conference that is entitled Building a Fire-Resilient Future for Heritage, Policy Coherence and Cross-Sectoral Cooperation. So we will have thoughts and presentations from our panelists, but I really encourage all of you to interact with us, with the panel, and share your experiences. So we'll have 2 or 3 questions on the panel, but after our discussion, I will appeal to you to also share your experiences. Is that okay? Okay, good. So our final session will underscore the need for harmonized policies and multi-sectoral collaboration to create a fire-resilient future for heritage. Thus, we will be talking about aligning cultural, climate, and disaster management policies, as well as ensuring community engagement. In this context, the policy development and concrete actions for reducing impacts of climate change and effective disaster risk management of cultural and natural heritage should involve all relevant cultural, climate, and disaster risk management stakeholders at all levels to evolve mechanisms for coordination and, where possible, undertake joint, culturally aware and sensitive and informed actions for mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. To discuss these themes, we have our distinguished panelists and participants. Let me introduce them one by one. Muhammad Al-Absi, architect from Jordan and specialist in disaster risk management and cultural heritage conservation. Muhammad is currently an expert at the Heritage Center of ISESCO, which is the Islamic World Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, where he primarily supports initiatives for risk management and heritage in post-conflict situations in Arab region. Muhammad also has over 10 years of experience working with the Department of Antiquities of Jordan in different positions, such as documentation section, the head of World Heritage section, and Muhammad has led many conservation projects. Please welcome Muhammad. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Nicole Greenwich from Barbados, representing here the disaster risk management, as a disaster risk management specialist, representing the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDMA. She has over 15 years of experience working in the field of disaster risk management and climate-related risk management. Nicole specializes in integrating DRM and climate change adaptation, resilience policy, and plan development for DRM, policy coherence, risk governance, and stakeholder engagement. Nicole leads the technical implementation of projects and programs on risk reduction, including on mainstreaming of DRR in key sectors and strengthening the national institutional framework for comprehensive disaster management. This entails assisting countries in adopting CDIMA model for the development of comprehensive disaster management policy, legislation, and country work programs. Please welcome Nicole. Thank you very much. Professor Keping Ma, Professor of Ecology and Northeast Forestry University and Institute of Botany of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the Vice Chair of and Secretary General of its Biodiversity Committee. Professor Ma is the Chancellor of IUCN and the Chair for Asia Regional Members Committee of IUCN. He was a Vice Chair for China National Expert Committee on World Natural Heritage. Keping has published more than 400 articles in academic magazines focusing on conservation, biogeography, and vegetation ecology. Please welcome Keping here. Thank you very much. Well, our next panelist is Max Oft, who is joining us online from Suriname. Max, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you. Hi everyone.
Great. Well, Max is a policy officer at the Association of Indigenous Village Leaders in Suriname, which is a body of all traditional authorities of all indigenous villages in the country. He worked for and with national and regional and international indigenous peoples organizations and has been involved in indigenous advocacy within, among others, the Biodiversity and Climate Change Conventions, and has supported various UN agencies in developing their indigenous policies, people's policies, most notably with UNDP and with UNESCO. He also worked in the National Coordination Center for Disaster Reduction in Suriname as a volunteer and as a project coordinator. Max participated in the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on World Heritage and also supported the recent study in the Guyanas on the traditional use of fire by indigenous communities. So please welcome Max once again. Thank you. Well, we have, as always, a limited time to discuss, well, about 1.5 hours, I assume, on the topic of policy coherence and cross-sectoral cooperation for building a fire-resilient future for heritage, which surely has a broader scope for preservation of cultural and natural heritage in times of emergencies. There are actually 3 questions that we want to pose to our distinguished panelists, but they are cross-linked and may also be reflected in a different ways, I would say. So going straight to the discussion, let me ask the first question. What gaps do you think currently exist in policy coherence related to fire resilience and overall heritage protection? So we will be speaking about policy gaps, and I would encourage our participants also to share after our discussion and presentation, maybe like 3 minutes each, just a brief reflection. Nicole, let me ask you first, as a representative of Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDIMA, on adoption of models for the development of comprehensive disaster management policy. Well, to what extent those policies and frameworks include or extended to culture and heritage, and if there are any gaps?
Thank you so much. So, good afternoon to everyone. So as you would have heard in the introduction, I work in the area of supporting the member states of CDIMA in adopting model comprehensive disaster management legislation, policy, and also in the development of their country work programs. In talking to a few of you over the last day and into today, I recognize that many of you may not know too much about SEDIMA, which is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And I just want to say a little about that so you could understand the perspective from which I am coming. So SEDIMA is an intergovernmental regional organization, and we represent 20 member states. And those member states go as far north as the Bahamas, which I'm sure many of you have heard of the Bahamas or would love to plan a vacation to the Bahamas. So as far north as the Bahamas, which is close by to Miami, and coming along the archipelago, you have Turks and Caicos Islands and British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, Antigua. I know coming around, you also have St. Lucia, Barbados, Trinidad, and then even we have member states at the tip of South America, which include Guyana, Suriname, who's on the line. And if we come around, we also have Belize, is a member state of SEDIMA, and of course, Jamaica, Cayman Islands. And the newest member of SEDIMA is St. Martin, Dutch St. Martin. So you could appreciate that that is a variety of countries. We have mainly English-speaking countries that make up SEDIMA, but we also have Haiti. I did not mention them. Haiti is a member state of SEDIMA, as well as those countries that would speak Dutch. Across these countries, we also have a variety of hazards that affect each country, and many of the countries are small island developing states. The idea behind SEDIMA is that because we are small, we cannot always depend on international assistance to give us help. We have to be our brother's keeper, and so your closest Caribbean neighbor can be the one that can provide you assistance quickly, and so we function in solidarity with each other. So the role of SEDIMA involves providing relief to its member states, that is disaster relief, and we work with the international community, including United Nations agencies, to coordinate that assistance to our member states, that relief. We also work in the area of providing information, serving as a clearinghouse for information on damages, risks that could affect our member states, as well as serving to promote disaster. Thank you. Serving to promote disaster loss reduction. In promoting disaster loss reduction, you need to have policies, you need to have strategies, you need to have plans in place. We also work to establish and enhance, as well as maintain, adequate emergency disaster response capabilities among the participating states. So this would include administering training, ensuring that we have regional warehouses that are stocked and available in time of need, and of course, looking at that full spectrum of disaster management, mitigating the consequences of disasters. So you see that we are functioning across each of the phases of the disaster management cycle. And that slide that I have on the screen highlights the blueprint for our operations in our countries. That blueprint that is on the screen is called the Comprehensive Disaster Management Regional Strategy. It is informed by international strategies. At the time, Hyogo Framework informed it, and then also we aligned it with the current Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. That is the international strategy that all of the countries that I mentioned would have signed on to. So for comprehensive disaster management, we have identified that there are 4 priority areas that we want to be working on as a Caribbean. The first one is institutional strengthening. The second speaks to knowledge management. The third, sector integration. And the fourth, community resilience. you could appreciate that the conversations that we're having from yesterday, even today, as it relates to cultural heritage, very much relate to these themes, because if we are going to move the needle on resilience to fire and other hazards for cultural heritage, then there needs to be attention given to institutional strengthening, to strengthening the policies that are in place in the country relating to this area, as well as the knowledge. Policies should be evidence-based. They should be fact-informed. And so you need to have those information available as to what are the risks, the assets that are exposed, and so on. And then therefore you can now speak about how will you mainstream, how will you integrate into the sector. Finally, and the conversation came up already yesterday, we were talking about how can we engage community. We are serving people, people should be at the heart of it, and resilience of the people is an important aspect, because at the end of the day, this heritage is important because of the people that need to have it, the generations, the ones now, and so on. So let's come right down then to the question. How are we addressing policy coherence, and what are the gaps? Now, on a day-to-day basis, I work with the disaster management coordinators in the countries, and presently we have a process underway of developing or updating what are called country work programs. I also work with them to update their disaster management policy. And what we've been doing over the years is to move away from just having something that speaks to response to looking at it in a comprehensive fashion. So we're looking at each phase, right? We want to prepare to respond. We want to be able to mitigate. And we also want to recover better, build back better. So we've been working with the countries to develop these local and national strategies that address all phases of the disaster management cycle. We've also been working with them to develop policies that will address all these phases, as well as involve the different sectors of the society, and to be inclusive, to include civil society, private sector, and so on. So when we speak about our brand of disaster management in the Caribbean, right now that is comprehensive disaster management, which is disaster management that addresses not only hurricanes, but also fires, earthquakes, floods, storm surge, the barrage of hazards that we face, human and natural, as well as addressing all phases, all people as part of that approach. And risk reduction is absolutely important. So coming back to the point, we have this process of developing country work programs underway. This is the opportunity for cultural heritage to be involved in the actual identification of priorities for resilience in the country. The second point relates to the development of the comprehensive disaster management policy. Now, I would have sat with Barbados 2 years ago, or 3 years now, to work with them almost as their consultant, but for SEDIMA, to develop what is now a cabinet-approved, a nationally approved comprehensive disaster management policy. The good thing is that coming out of workshops that UNESCO would have had with SEDIMA, which we collaborated on back in 2020, Barbados participated in that workshop, and cultural heritage was identified as a priority then. So then when I came to the table now to gather up all of the information in terms of what was important, it was already articulated that cultural heritage needs to be included in the Barbados CDM policy. And that document is online. And when you look at it, the first point in the document speaks to a robust, well-resourced system, and it speaks to operational readiness, and cultural heritage is included there. It is also, specifically, it speaks to, just to give you an idea, prepare, enhance the National Hazard Disaster Management Plan for key sectors, including emerging critical sectors such as the cultural heritage sector for operational management. And then at the fourth priority area, where comprehensive disaster management is mainstreamed and led by key sectors, it speaks there about giving an emphasis to cultural heritage, and it names others. This is now fully integrated into a national strategic policy document for Barbados as an example. Now, have we gotten to this point in the other countries? And the answer is no. But what we are seeking to do now is to ensure that in our model guidance, when each country comes now to the cycle of renewing or updating their policy, this is now the opportunity to incorporate the matters and the priorities relating to the cultural heritage and fire resilience and so on into at the policy level. Now, we know national policies may have a longer cycle and time frame, but with the country work program cycle, that usually has 3 to 5 years for renewal. And there are a barrage of countries right now that are renewing their country work programs. And I can tell you now that having sat in the sessions and understood firsthand for myself some of the issues being faced, I think that's an absolutely important space to incorporate from a planning perspective how we will go forward with resilience in the cultural sector. So I think I would pause there, and so therefore on the screen what you can see is the CDM policy, which is the institutional arrangement that we have. We also have CDM legislation that we work with countries on, the country work program, which is a strategic document, and then we also have a CDM audit, which establishes standards which each country should be at on each phase of the disaster management cycle. And those model tools to the right are the tools that we use to work with countries to guide them on how they can incorporate and address in a comprehensive manner on disaster risk management. What we want to do now is to update these tools. We are about to update them, and I think it's an absolutely good place to be at, where now we're doing the updating that we can be able to incorporate in there the guidance for our culture and how culture and resilience should be addressed in disaster risk management planning is a perfect opportunity. So those are the gaps. In summary then is that we don't have it written out in our model documents right now. However, what we've been able to do is that with the information and the sensitization that has been happening since 2020 in the Caribbean, to do that on a country-by-country basis, to incorporate it into their policies at this point, and there's the opportunity now to work with countries on their country work programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Really, it's a long way to go, and we passed some of the steps already since 2020, even earlier, 2019. We started to collaborate with CDIMA. I mean, UNESCO and CDIMA started collaboration, and we developed the guidance for strategy and action plan on the national level, having also pilot activities in the Caribbean. And we are now coming to the adoption of the strategy and action plan for the region on the level of CARICOM Regional Cultural Committee. So it's a type of collaboration that is really encouraged, and that's how you can make culture sector at large, not only heritage, bold and respected, and also taken care of. Thank you once again. Now we are moving to Keping. Yes, I would like to ask you to share your thoughts to what extent natural heritage is included in policy making, and is there any gaps to address it at all levels from your experience?
Thank you, Yuri. And dear colleagues, my name is Keping Ma from China. I am an ecologist. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank UNESCO and the local organizer of the conference help me to make the long trip possible. And also, I'm honored to join this conference. And Nico just present a very good talk with very good coverage. So I just like to share 2 points from my observations. And first, yesterday and this morning, the third session, we really highlighted the role of local communities. I fully agree. And as for the policy coherence for the whole system of disaster mitigation, the critical contribution and important role of local community should be highlighted. But in fact, there are very few cases to show the deeply involvement of local communities in decision-making process and the policy development process. So I think this is the point I would like to share with you, that this kind of situation should be improved. Local community should be a very important player for policy development, not being treated as audience to be educated with the existing policy. And also, with the development of an application of advanced technologies in disaster risk mitigation process, the local communities should have the opportunities to raise their capabilities, capacities. And I just like to take 2 examples in this regard. First, in the world's natural heritage, usually located in remote areas without mobile signals or very weak. So the professional communication techniques, associated infrastructures are very important being used. But local communities usually are not able to use such kind of advanced technologies. So this kind of training should be highlighted. And also, there are widely used of remote sensing detection or monitoring systems, and how to timely inform local communities with the information from the remote sensing detection and monitoring systems. These 2 examples I just like to share with you and to be highlighted for the training of local communities. I think the policy should promote these kind of actions. And at the national level, I think different agencies might have different responsibilities for the management of World Natural Heritage Sites, such as Ministry of Natural Resources might focus on the conservation role function of World Natural Heritage Site. But for Ministry of Emergency Management, they might focus on disaster mitigation, how to set up connections to develop synergetic policy coherence among different agencies. I think this is also a very important area to be promoted. So I just like to share these 2 points with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kupima. Speaking about the reaching out to local communities without the technical means, UNESCO is also having a program under communication and information sector where we deliver radio in the box for the local communities, and especially and training them to use it in the time of disaster or whenever they feel necessary. So it's basically a backpack with equipment that you can plug in for microphones or your music instruments, or having a background music and so on. And you can streamline in the internet, or there's an additional option that you can use the radio frequency to actually broadcast. So things like small radios do exist. They cost nothing. I mean, the local communities usually using the radio. They have a signal. So this radio in the box is helping actually in getting communities engaged, informed, and be more resilient. So this is an experience from UNESCO that you can perhaps also search for, because there are commercial organizations that are dealing with such equipment. Well, thank you once again. Now let me ask Muhammad. So Muhammad, you've been involved in the initiatives of risk management and heritage and in post-conflict situations in the Arab region. And what would you identify as the policy gaps, and what can be further prioritized and improved in this way? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I just tried to do kind of brainstorming and try to connect what exactly we have gaps by experience, and which gaps we have identified during working on sites, on World Heritage, when we deal with practitioners, when we deal with local communities. So I come up with some gaps. It's not a list, or it's something come with experience, and everyone definitely has experienced types of gaps in policymaker, with speaking with policymakers. Anyway, first, I think policy should somehow consider different enclosures. So usually when you are a site manager, you just care about the boundaries of your site, but we understand that heritage doesn't stand alone. So there is a lot of connections, social connections, ecological connections, natural landscape. So there is a lot of connections outside the boundaries. So the wider context should be considered somehow. And this is somehow add more key actors, need some logistics, some communication agreements between agencies, but we should take this because heritage, as I said before, doesn't stand alone without any connections. There is a lot of connection with the surroundings. Okay, this doesn't work. This slide is the most important one to not get fired. Okay, doesn't work.
Can we switch?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Now, so I will ask you every time to switch because it doesn't work. Anyway, so this is an example has been developed by one of the participants in disaster risk training course in Category 2 Center of UNESCO in Bahrain, and he's from Egypt. So this is there is another case has been presented yesterday by Abdul Hamid. It's close to this case. However, this site is called Muhammad Ali Saghir Sabil, and there is a fire incident has been break out there in 2018. There's a lot of wood elements, but the most dangerous part, and this was the start of the fire in that time, that the building, the surrounding, all the building are taller than this building. So most of the people who living in the surrounding, they throw things from windows, and you can see how much the paper, rubbish, and everything has been collected from the surrounding. So this is something about urban development. So they just like make high-rise building, they just create a new building, but they don't care about the surrounding and overall master plan. So when we think about the site itself, it doesn't has any risk of fire, and fire does not likely to break out in this building. But when we consider the surrounding, the fire risk increased very high. We should proceed, please. This doesn't work. Okay. Here another case from Jordan. This is they call Citadel site. It's very important site for the national level, and the site has many layers of civilization from the Iron Age till mid-Islamic era. And what we can see that in the spring that a lot of shrubs, small plants grow, and by the summer they become dry and the fire break out in many locations. What we do usually, they clean in the site close to the trails, close to the tourists walk, but in the surrounding area, I need to use pointer anyway. In the surrounding area, they don't really clean much, and they don't remove the dry plants. So most of the firework come from the steep sides of the hill, and that's very weird. They don't remove it usually. They do, but the focus from the site itself. However, one time there is a firework, and just like small part of the firework went wrong and the fire break out. It's well controlled, and civil defense usually deal with that very quickly. However, there is still a risk. When you look to this site, it's a stone, unlikely to have fire. But when it comes to the surrounding, to the slope, to the hill itself, to the mountain where the site located, there are a lot of resources that we can have fire. So we should consider enclosures anyway. Can we proceed, please? So if you look to the surrounding, you can see a lot of resources that you know that fire could come from these parts. Next, please. There is also another gap that we have lack of resources and capacities. And this case is very interesting that we have a site in a salt historical. Okay, sorry. So this is a World Heritage Site, and it's a historic center, and there's a lot of buildings. And this one of the building we were doing rehabilitation. So if we do next, we can see the result. Next. Okay, so this is the so far results. They're still working. In our plans, we have a lot of systems to deal with fire risk because they want to adapt this building to be an academy. So we had a shortage in fund, so they have to sacrifice with some systems. So what they select to remove the fire fighting systems. So far, we don't have any fire risk, but when this building become an academy, we have furnitures, we have computers, we have a lot of systems will be in the building, the fire risk will be very high. So sometimes lack of resources just like put you in a very hard decisions, but we are lucky that we will get a new fund to complete the furniture, to make it an academy, and we will just integrate some system within the second phase of rehabilitation of this building. Another one, can you just next, please? Okay, another fire incident happened in 2019 in the main store of artifacts. So there's a lot of excavation in Jordan, and everything they find, they just put in this storage. It's a steel structure, hangar, and the fire was really limited to one room. They said, like the official statement, that there is nothing has been affected, but from the photo we can see that some artifacts has been affected. So we went through assessment to this building, and we finally we get conclusion that this building is not really a good place to. It's a steel structure. It's a very old, in a bad condition. Even integrated system could not really like be beneficial with a fire. So we proposed to. I know this is somehow expensive, but somehow we should be effective. The policy should be effective and should have really a solution. So the Director General at that time talked to the Prime Minister, and they agreed to have a new building. So if we proceed to the next slide, so we can see this is the design, and the construction is undergoing. So I think now they are about to open the new. And I remember at that stage of design, we invited a lot of experts in risk management, and they just like input in the design, trying to change some functions in the building to ensure that there is no fire or other risk could happen in this building. The last gap that, next please. Okay, the last gap is policy should consider social factors. So without dealing with local community, a lot of my colleagues already talk about this, but I will just, I have experienced that in Petra. So I was working in Petra, and there is a publication has been done by Leuven University. They just like work to do assessment, and they identify fire as a risk. So I was in Petra, it's a stone structure. Like, where could fire happen? That's somehow weird. But next, please. When I just work with Petra for 3 years, I figure out where this risk could come from. So usually local community like to stay in caves, and they just like make a small fire, they drink tea. This is something social they do. It's not good for the heritage, but we should figure out kind of method to adapt them to not do this or find a solution. Anyway, the site has some conflict because the local community has been removed from the site in 1986, and they just look at them in the buffer zone, and now we have problem. The place they are staying is very small, so they have to remove them another. So it's a long story, but in this case, we still don't have a fire like what we have in other buildings. But for the long run, you can see that we have black dust on the top, on the walls. This has been curved in the mountain. What will happen if we clean this? We will lose definitely part of the walls. So you know this, you all practitioners, and you know in conservation we have patina, and when you just clean the building, you lose part of the building, maybe millimeters. And most of these walls have inscriptions, plaster, frescoes. There is a lot of let's say, historical resources in this building. So once you just like have black dust inside and you remove it, you will lose part of this or source of information about these caves and buildings. So we need to think about fire as with a slow impact. Maybe in the future, if we just keep saying, okay, this is a good practice, just keep doing this, in the future we will have all the caves like black inside, which is something we are not looking for. This is some ideas. The last one is the lack of communication. I will just go back to the first or second slide quickly, then I will pass the floor. So lack of communication in the first, can we go to the second slide? No, back. This one, yes. Our colleague who developed a project, we help him to get fund, and he get fund from Aleph to work with this site. When he started working, he distinguished that this site owned by Ministry of Endowment, and the conservation stuff, the one who care about Ministry of Tourism. So to get access to the building, he should go to the ministry, and to get approval of technical approach, he should go to another ministry. So the communication was very hard to get approval from two, and both of them, they are ministries, they are governmental bodies, but they don't communicate between each other. So the building has historical value, and so I feel lack of communication somehow affect our policies to succeed. So this is some ideas, and we will just proceed with other slides and concept maybe in other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammad. Thanks for sharing. I mean, we can see obviously the fire and danger in the remote sites and stone, material, not only in the urban environment. So yeah, it's quite a common issue. Let me now ask Max if Max is following us, right? Yeah, we can see you.
Yes.
Clearly and here, yes. So Max, in your advocacy for the indigenous people's policies, how can you reflect on this issue from the perspective of inclusion of traditional, indigenous, and local knowledge, especially that culture and heritage can be seen as a source of strength and resilience for the communities? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying that I apologize for not being there physically. I would really have loved to be there, but for logistic reasons, it wasn't possible. But I'm following, and I think this is a really important conference, and hopefully it will indeed lead to changes and indeed policy changes. I prepared a presentation, which I will probably present in parts, reflecting on the questions that you are posing. And I actually started with the first question, the one of the gaps. So I'll go there. And sorry, am I presenting or is someone else presenting? Okay, yes.
Your screen is shared, I expect. You are presenting.
Okay, good. Okay, so one of our major recommendations has always been that there should be holistic approaches. It goes further than even just cross-sectoral. Even the word cross-sectoral is already sectoral. And what we are talking about is that there is no artificial distinction or separation between culture, nature, heritage, but also not between these aspects and rights, equality, and justice. You cannot separate like culture from rights. In various of the World Heritage Convention committee meetings, I have heard, for example, people saying, well, this is not the Human Rights Council. We're not talking about rights here. And that in itself illustrates how limited the scope of maybe some persons, but also from processes is, that you cannot separate rights, you cannot separate people's livelihoods, you cannot separate culture from heritage and from nature and from beliefs and from everything. And that is indeed, one of the major gaps that I think we should identify as a gap, that it is not holistic enough. It goes further than cross-sectoral again. And that needs to translate into policy, of course. It's not just the assessment and analysis and identification of the gap. It should actually proceed into action to remediate this. So I actually looked at a fire management guide that was presented yesterday, and one of the things that I noticed is that the word rights is not even in there. There is participation, there is SDGs are in there, which in themselves should be rights-based, but the word rights doesn't appear, and certainly not indigenous people's rights. So again, I come back to the holistic understanding of heritage. This morning, it was also mentioned, for example, you cannot burn our supermarket. Maybe not in those words, but the point is, indeed, it's not good. I mean, fire, and that's something else, fire, I will get back there, is often portrayed as negative, whereas fire is part of daily life of indigenous people. So if you approach it only from the negative side, then that is in itself already a big gap, because then you are sometimes even literally criminalizing peoples and communities. But the heritage, again, why I'm saying it is that it is so important to understand that heritage is not a sector. It's something within people. It's something within you. It's not something that you buy a trip to. I'm going to look at heritage, or I'm going to read about heritage. It's more than that. It's part of your identity, where you come from, where you want to go as an individual and as a whole people. It's interwoven with culture, nature, with the supernatural world, with history, with leaders and leadership. It defines norms and values, and it defines your behavior as a person, and again, as collectivity, as a people. So heritage conventions are useful for protection, conservation, and management, but they should go further, and that's the other gap. They should go further and have indeed more policy coherence among the different, what are now called sectors. As I mentioned, and I want to, for brevity and in the interest of time, I will refer to the report that was very recently published, and I think you heard about it yesterday too, on the use of fire by indigenous peoples. And that shows how many uses there are of fire by indigenous peoples. And I want to highlight one of them, and that is the patch mosaic burning techniques, the periodic burning to prevent actually larger fires and to prevent the building up of, how do you call it, combustible materials. And of course, also for food purposes, for social bonding, for a lot of uses that are bound to the daily life of indigenous peoples. And these things do not show up in many of the, in fire management or in fire prevention, or also in disaster management and prevention and recovery aspects, which means that those policies are limited. They do not address the full picture. And that is, again, the big gap. The policies are not holistic enough, not sufficiently cultural sensitive, not explicitly rights-based, not taking full advantage of existing traditional knowledge about fire prevention and management, and not taking into account the diversified impacts of fires, but also of heritage protection by indigenous peoples, because we do have that knowledge about fire, we can contribute it, and that leads to the next gap, and that is that there is too little focus on capacity strengthening and empowerment at local level and bottom-up approaches. Too often we see that international heritage protection and disaster management are occurring at, that level up somewhere, government level, but at the community level where the impacts are highest, there is very little participation, very little bottom-up approach. People may not even know how it works at local level, but they're making policies, and these things are some of the gaps that we really need to address. And in the recommendations, I'll come back to what I think should happen next. I think that's one of the next questions. I hope I addressed this question, but I have some more slides to share. Thank you for now.
Your field of study. Well, thank you very much. Now, let me address you, dear colleagues, participants. If you have any reflections on the, oh, I see some hands. Can we give the light? Yes. I can see two hands, perhaps, yeah. Just briefly from your side. Deborah K. Palmer, please.
Hello, thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Yuri. Just commenting on the presentation from Nicole. In Jamaica, we've been looking at building our own resilience in the culture sector. And coming out of that meeting in 2020, we've been able to do the national plan, the national action plan and strategy for Jamaica in relation to protecting cultural resources, in particular our repositories. And just listening to Anne's presentation yesterday and our presentation from Nicole, you know, we're in a place where cultural repositories are located in buildings that were not meant for them. So you're storing objects in wooden buildings, etc. And that recognition and the engagement with disaster management, the sector, is something that we've been trying to insert ourselves more in. I think one of our main questions is how to keep that going, because I'm encouraged by what Nicole said, that SEDIMA will incorporate cultural heritage in their plans. But how do we keep that going in our islands? Because considering our as small island states, our cultural heritage sometimes is way down the totem pole when we're considering, flooding risks, fire risks for homes and schools and hospitals. We are not often kept into that loop. And so the question is, how do we keep ourselves on the front burner and not relegated to, for example, we had a fire in one of our heritage buildings or repositories, and the first thing that came in with the fire, was huge amounts of water, which obviously will do as much damage as fire, So to keep us on the front burner, to keep us on the same page, to keep us speaking the same language are the issues we find, and to also integrate into our policies on the end of culture and on the end of disaster risk management, that we're always speaking. We can speak to each other and keep the issues on the forefront. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Yes, please introduce yourself. You have 3 to 5 minutes, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I come from Bolivia. Thank you. I would like to thank the panelists. It has been a pleasure to hear talking about the communities and indigenous communities, because in Bolivia we have 36 indigenous communities, and for us it is very important to talk about heritage, but together with the cultural aspect, with the cosmovision of each place. Therefore, this session has been very important for us. I would also like to share the concerns addressed by the panelists and the importance of looking into these plans and the policies in a holistic manner, as Professor Kerpen was saying, because it is very important. Unfortunately, many times site managers have been forced to create some policies that mostly restrict cultural development. As Muhammad was saying, the fact that we are taking away spaces from the communities in terms of their own heritage. The same thing, a similar thing happens in Samaipata, which is an archaeological site of high importance. Beforehand, many rituals took place in a town next to this heritage site. However, due to international protocols, this has been prohibited. And there are some rituals and activities that took place over the rock due to international protocols and to take care of the area. And here's my question. Which actions should we conduct, or which policies should be in place to not lead to this separation of heritage and cultural, but to complement it in a holistic manner and support our communities so that they can feel strengthened with heritage and not the other way around, which is unfortunately what we're doing right now as site managers with these policies and protocols. The contrary is taking place. And how can we make these policies, as Max was saying, be bottom up, not from top down? How can we make our communities becoming part of the creation of these public policies and international policies as well? It would be a good thing to have more of these instances, to see a greater participation of the local stakeholders of each community, each indigenous people. And that is my question and my reflection as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your voice from Bolivia. I think we are addressing this kind of question through our presentations. And if you allow, we can move to the next section with this, because it will definitely speak about collaboration on different levels. So the next set of discussion will reflect on the collaboration between culture, disaster, climate sectors, etc. I mean, we have many stakeholders that will need to have a collaboration, and of course, hearing the voice of local communities, but also what is the role of international organizations in this regard. So let me ask Muhammad. UNESCO is advocating for wider inclusion of culture sector in the relief and recovery systems established by the United Nations, World Bank, European Commission, as well as other regional bodies. So how do you see and experience such collaboration? And Perhaps you know, since you are also heritage expert, you know how the World Heritage System and protection under the convention also advocates for this kind of cooperation and collaboration.
Okay, I would also just quickly regarding to the second question, she mentioned that there is kind of conflict between our policies and local communities. We're trying to enforce our policies, but at the same time, we just like sometimes it's not really considered local communities. So this is something should be considered. It's a nice reflection on policy session. So balance usually should be the solution. It's not easy to find solution between both, but it's usually discussions and communicate with local community definitely will find. And there is a lot of successful story about heritage impact assessment and how they deal with kind of projects and just like trying to compromise. And they find solution finally. It helped to keep development going on, but in the same time not harmful to the and everyone can understand his situation better than anyone. So usually practitioners, they can come up with a solution from the site itself. I would in general, like there is a lot of efforts, a lot of projects going on. The thing that the connections between funding organizations, between international organizations, somehow are specific to specific type of regions, specific types of risks. We in SSCO have established Heritage Center, and this Heritage Center serve around 54 state members of this organization, and they define a group of flagships, and one of them is about disaster risk management and post-conflict. So I think these part of our organizations who have interest in heritage, they are supportive to UNESCO efforts in working on World Heritage sites, because World Heritage is part of the World Heritage itself. So we have a World Heritage stamp, but we have other type of heritage. So what we come up in SSCO just to develop the collaboration, it's to have a new portal up in our Heritage Center, and this portal has different lists of heritage sites. They are considered with the national and local values, and we now have more than 700 sites from Asia, Africa, and Middle East. And this is somehow give recognition for these sites to be considered by international organizations and funding organizations. So if they say, why you just want to just work with this site, you have some information, at least you have prepared, you have boundaries, you have photos. So we're trying to consider larger context of heritage. The Heritage Center in SSCO is very recent, and we have a lot of initiatives. So maybe in the future we can share more about our experience projects. Now we communicate with Alif, so we will have special call for SSCO, and we have training course for sites in danger list. So we are supportive to international cooperation, and there is a lot of small organizations work on the ground. So if we network all together, we communicate, so we can serve as many heritage sites as we can. And now we are doing this. We have MOU with ICROM, we have MOU with UNESCO, we have with Category 2 Center in Bahrain, and we're trying to develop the network to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind. Thanks.
Thank you, Muhammad, for sharing your thoughts and also, perspectives of collaboration. Of course, we are speaking the same language. We're touching the same ground here. Keping Ma, the next question to you. I mean, your reflection on this cross-sectoral collaboration and also being part of IUCN and being part of the Committee for Protection of Natural Heritage in China. Maybe you can share your thoughts and give an example.
Thank you, Yuri. I would like to share my view that by application of advanced technology to promote collaboration across agencies or sectors. I think this is very important for some countries. You can see the application of advanced technologies such as remote sensing, early detection or monitoring system for, say, fire risk management. And I just like to take China as an example. And at the national level, we have three ministries related to management of world's natural heritage sites. And the first is State Forestry and Grassland Administration, who is responsible for the management of natural heritage, say protected areas in general, including world natural heritage sites. And the second agency is Ministry of Ecology and Environment. And this ministry is aiming at inspection on the management of protected areas. And the third ministry is Ministry of Emergency Management, who is looking at the disaster mitigation and also for monitoring of disasters. And the three ministries already established remote sensing monitoring system for decades. So they have this kind of information for the early detection of disasters, in particular for fire, wildfire in particular. And they have data, they have information, so we need communication among these kind of agencies. And the communication here is not only refers to the dialogue among ministries, but also sharing data, the geographical coordinates, the dynamics of fire and some other disasters, and this kind of information shared among different ministries and also with local heritage sites. Those information are very important for, say, fire fighting. And I think by promoting this kind of application of advanced technologies, the collaboration among different agencies should also be highlighted. And not only at the national level, but at the site level. For most of the natural heritage sites, I refer to world natural heritage sites of China. We have 15 such kind of sites. And we also have 4 mixture, the culture and natural sites, mixture sites. And these kind of world heritage sites, most of them already established the video camera, local remote sensing, I refer to near surface remote sensing techniques. That kind of networks are located in the natural heritage sites. So these kind of facilities could be used to collect data at the site level. And this kind of information being managed based on GIS system, geographical information system. So this is a very good basis for being used of development of mathematical model together with other information such as the lithophore dynamics, the humidity of air and rainfall, this kind of climate factors. So the experts team can, based on these, to develop mathematical models to predict, to assess the fire risk at the site level, and also shared with other stakeholders. So this kind of application of advanced technologies and the networking should be used to promote the collaborations among sectors and stakeholders. So this is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Well, your excellent example surely gives us a hope, you know, to have an effort to coordinate different ministries and local governance and local communities, and using the upfront technologies. I mean, this is something that we are really, you know, could give us a solution. All right. Well, next question, Max, to you. Well, it's basically same question, but we would like to hear about community-centered disaster risk management programs that are essential for effective protection of cultural and natural heritage against disasters. And you know, if you can reflect on people-centric approach to decision-making, education, raising awareness, etc. Max, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, as I mentioned, and the lady in the audience also mentioned it, the bottom-up approach is one of the big necessities for, indeed, collaboration, cooperation, a more holistic approach. What we see in practice is that a lot of the things that are being done, very likely with the best intentions, are not as effective as they should be. For example, there is climate resilient programs. We hear about a lot of money being given by donors, by international organizations, but at the local level, we do not actually see it back. I mean, in terms of money, not in terms of results. And we do need to start being more demanding for accountability. There is so much money being spent at the, well, spent, yes, at probably at the national level, but local communities do not see very much. Our contributions are not actually visible. We're talking about traditional knowledge. One of the things that we have noticed is that traditional knowledge is also seen as a kind of economic resource. Even research, academia, they take a very, I would say, extractive approach to traditional knowledge. At least that's one of the experiences that we hear about time and time again, that the communities are confronted with researchers that only want knowledge. They want to carry away information and knowledge without necessarily respecting, again, that holistic link between knowledge, between livelihood, between culture, between heritage, and also between disaster prevention and management. We've spoken about disaster management and management, which are also important. I wouldn't say more important for communities that are dependent on these natural environments that the people are actually dependent on, and the impacts are direct and immediate. I want to stress on the role of women, because it are often the indigenous women at community level who feel the weight of these processes the most. At the same time, the women are also the ones who are transferring knowledge, who are actually rebuilding the helping, of course, the men are there too, but the women are so important with their traditional knowledge, with their transfer of culture within the role of women in agriculture, in production. So I would want to stress on gender sensitive approaches as well. I mentioned culturally sensitive approaches. I mentioned the donors who are involved and should be having a much more bottom-up approach. I mentioned the role of traditional knowledge systems, not as an extractive resource, but again, within that fuller picture of a holistic and rights-based and empowerment approach. Because again, if we're talking about capacity strengthening, if we're talking about empowerment, that should actually happen where the disasters happen. It shouldn't be somewhere up in the air in where we do not see what is actually happening with all this funding that is being given for disaster management or for climate adaptation and mitigation or for fire management as well. So my concrete recommendation in line with your previous question would be that there should be a structured process. And I stress on structured. It should be, for example, all the agencies, indigenous peoples, academia, coming together to talk about a process that will lead to more cross-sectoral, holistic, rights-based, bottom-up approaches. A process where you have people around the table discussing programmatically what do we need to achieve. We're talking about cross-sectoral. We're talking about holistic. What do we actually want to achieve, right? And not leave it to incidental, very good events with a lot of recommendations, but then each agency is doing its own thing again, right? And that doesn't work. We should, and maybe I'm behind, maybe there is already something in place on that. But as far as I know, indigenous peoples are then not involved. But what I'm saying is that it should be a joint effort together defining the way forward in a structured manner that this maybe it's a committee or a commission or something, a working group that puts together a program of what do we want to achieve within 3 or 5 years on having a cross-sectoral, rights-based, bottom-up approach to fire management, to community involvement, to disaster management at local level, to heritage protection that takes into account fires. So that should be a process. It shouldn't be up in the air and everyone has his or her own views on what to achieve, how to achieve it. That leads to dispersion of resources. So that will be my main recommendation, that we indeed have such a process of collaborative thinking, of collaborative design of a follow-up program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. I think we raise the questions and the answers we'll have to find along the way. One of the recommendation, at least from UNESCO Kingston office, is perhaps to apply to Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund and try to involve communities into the policy making process. As such, St. Kitts and Nevis is now finalizing the project on ICH policy that was really involved the communities to the discussion and trainings. Well, as of now, we have one more speaker, the panelist, and this will be the final reflection of this panel. I think we are aware of time. So, Nicole, I mean, moving from the comprehensive disaster management framework of CDMA, I know that you really engage all international actors, local actors, and funding agencies. I've been in one of your annual meetings back in the days pre-COVID. I don't know, maybe 500 participants from all over the Caribbean, but also from abroad, coming to your platform and establishing a kind of cooperation coordination. UNESCO at that time, we conducted a side session on culture and disasters, and we've got about 50 people that were interested in our session. I mean, they are not from cultural sector, but they're they are dealing with the disasters and managing disasters. So please, Nicole, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for that mention of the Comprehensive Disaster Management Conference. This is a conference that is held every 2 years. Because of COVID, the last conference, we held that mainly online with few participants in person, but we had to keep the conversation going and continue to have the space. Actually, there is a conference in December, the first week in December. It's online. You can the information is online and it's being held in St. Kitts and Nevis, actually. It's important to keep the conversation going and to also recognize that the actors and those persons working in the space change. So we would have started that broad conversation in 2020 after the 2019 CDM conference, but since then you would have disaster management coordinators that would have changed, ministers in countries that would have changed, and if you understand the context in the Caribbean, you know, when people change, programs change, agenda change. Maybe it's the same where you are too. So it is important to have the door open to continue to build awareness and to sensitize. And I think with UNESCO, this is a role that you can continue to play in terms of, you know, convening the actors in the space and the space that SEDEMA would want to continue working in to continue to convene and to bring people together and to sensitize on this topic. For the last 2 days, this has been very helpful to me, you know, because it was kind of on the fringe in terms of my you know, attention to the topic, but just coming, you know, to hear firsthand has been very useful for me. And I think that as disaster management coordinators hear and understand, then when you hear and you understand, then you start to think about how you can collaborate. Because unless you understand what the issues are, then, you know, you get the invitation to come to something, or you don't get the invitation to come to an event because you don't understand that it is important for you to incorporate this, or you don't understand that it's important to ensure that this is a national priority. And having said that, policy is really important. I know that we want to install the fire extinguishers, to have the alarms in place, to do drills and things of this sort. This is very tactile, this is very much hands-on, and it is important to be done. But you need to have the authority and the governance in place, which is why the policy is important, which is why as a sector you need to also organize. Now, we understand that in the different countries, the way how cultural heritage or culture is managed by different entities within the country. And oftentimes there's not an umbrella body, or there's not a plan in place that says this is where we as a country want to go on this area. And UNESCO has been doing a good job in terms of providing guidance tools and documents for this work. What we need to do now is pull together and frame up for your sector what the plan needs to be. When you start to think about what the plan needs to be, then you can be able to talk to a disaster management person to say, this is what we need from you. Because it's hardly going to be that the disaster management coordinator or the entity is going to come to you and say, what do you need from us? So for us, we've been, you know, we're being educated and sensitized that this is a very important area. I think from disaster management, we've always known that it's important to, you know, understand culture and how, you know, you may design an intervention in a community. You know, you have to appreciate the culture, but then I think there's different perspectives that we really didn't really understand how broad it is. And so we need to continue to do the sensitization. And we need to, once we get policy to, we can't say, oh, we're done. That's just the beginning, because in the case of Barbados, for example, okay, the policy will give you authority to say to your minister, to your permanent secretary, the policy is there, you can say now, strategic item and quote the number, you know, requires that we have this and this in place. And you can then use that to say, well, we therefore now need to have the resources. We therefore now need to have, you know, with the policy, that's what gives you authority to request and to do certain things in the country. But then again, that's going to take some leadership from yourselves. So you would have been invited to the table. So I can put up my slide, this last slide that I had, which is about opportunities. So
Can we have the presentation on, please?
it's the last one that's named opportunities. Just go down. Yes. So, you can have a voice and a space in the disaster management community. To hear you, the door has been opened. And so we need to now walk through the door with confidence. But you need to have some idea as to what is it that you want to achieve in the culture sector. The country work program is not a Caribbean thing. What I can say is a Caribbean name, but the international name is called Disaster Risk Reduction Strategies. So internationally, regardless of whichever country, if your country is a signatory to the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, you are required to have a disaster risk reduction strategy at the local and national level. And there's a target E that says, internationally, target E, we want to increase the number of countries that have these strategies, that have these programs in place. In the Caribbean, we call them, our lingo is country work program. But internationally, every country should have one of these. And these country strategies have specific criteria that they should meet to be recognized internationally. And one of those criteria speaks to policy coherence. Okay, so whether that's on the side of the SDGs or with poverty eradication, climate change adaptation, and then you have a door there, culture and the heritage sector, resilience relating to that, policy coherence. So you have a door, you have a way to ensure that you have a voice, and to lobby. We have to keep the door open, and you have to continue to share why it is important for considerations to be given to culture in your country strategy. To me, the cases that were made here today were very strong. And if, as a leader, I were to hear this, I would certainly, take action at least to incorporate it into the strategy for the country. The next pointer that I have there, I spoke about resource mobilization, just to say, again, with the country work program today, or should I say over the last few days, looking at this, the manual, this gives you practical things that you can do. Just if I could break it down for you in terms of the logic model. So you have your policy, and your policy would articulate what is your vision for the culture sector. We want to be resilient to natural and man-made hazards, whatever that is, including fire, right? Maybe fire is your priority for the next 3 to 5 years, but, we should recognize that fire is not the only hazard. And for this last session, we do recognize we are working in a multi-hazard and complex environment. So we have to look at hazards not by themselves, but also how they may connect with other hazards. That's important, yes? So you would articulate at your vision, your strategic level, this is where we want to be. And then the question is, how are we going to get there, right? So now you come down to your strategy for getting there. And you would articulate, we want to, for example, increase the number of World Heritage sites that have plans in place for risk reduction, or that have a risk reduction plan, or something like this. You would articulate and say specifically that we want to have fire, whatever it is, fire prevention strategies in place in at least 80% of whatever it is. You need to have targets. So you break it down. And then further to that, you'll have your specific activities, yes? How will we achieve that fire resilience, well, we're going to do drills. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to procure so much and so much equipment, whatever it is. So I'm just, bringing it down, looking at the chain of how we will get to these specifics. So I think that over the last few days, we have talked a lot. Yes, the emphasis has been on fire. We have understood some of the causes, what can be done about it, and that it's one hazard that at least we can impact on, yes? As opposed to a hurricane, you can't really affect, how intense that's gonna be, but you can be better prepared for how that will be dealt with. You can do more capacity building and so on. So the thoughts I want to leave with you is the final item there on recovery. So the other item speaks to looking at all the phases of the cycle. In Anne's presentation, she spoke about the long road to recovery. In the case of Barbados and what has happened with the archives. Prevention is better, isn't it? Because we definitely don't want to lose, and recovery is slow and it can be painful. But what we want to put in place will be frameworks for recovery. So you can be able to articulate from a policy perspective where you want to go on recovery. That list of individuals that you may want to have the surge capacity that when it's time to recover, you are able to have that list in place. So I want to encourage us all, let us start somewhere, yeah? Let us keep the door open, the conversation going. For UNESCO, we want you to continue to, convene, to continue to give the spaces for collaboration, to continue to, channel resources that can help the sector to organize itself and to be able to define for itself what will be its priorities for resilience and its plans for getting there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you. I think, yes, we can upload. That's our roadmap. In fact, what was presented by Nicole, and this is end of our session. This is our roadmap. And to walk that way, I think we also need to be more consolidated in our sector. I mean, culture is so diverse. I mean, we are linked to tourism and infrastructure and education. It's not only heritage, it's people, I mean, everything that is associated with people linked to culture. So we are very diverse, and sometimes we don't know the ground. We need to be more consolidated in terms of cultural, natural heritage and cultural sector at large, cultural industries. And then, I mean, once we can observe and understand that culture is a sector, it's a sector of economy, it's a sector of social cohesion and everything. Then we can really be strong and bold and be heard. All right. So with this, let me ask panelists if you have anything to add to your presentations. Max, maybe you can have something. Say us few words. I mean, your voice is really encouraging.
Okay. Thank you. For giving me the opportunity to say some last words. I think this conference is very encouraging again, and I've heard a lot of goodwill. And like Nicole said, we have to keep the door open, but let's also plan. It's not just willingness, it has to translate into actual programmatic approaches. As again, calling on Nicole's previous intervention, you have to make a log frame for it. It doesn't happen automatically. It has to be programmatic. Let's indeed schedule a process towards better integration, towards more holistic approaches, again, towards more rights-based approaches, bottom-up approaches. If that can be the result of this conference, that will make me happy. And I hope that everyone indeed signs up to that approach, that indeed fire management, risk management, disaster management is something broader than sectors and is, again, rights-based, include us, indigenous peoples, from the bottom up in decision-taking with free, prior, and informed consent. The ICH is one of the few conventions that clearly recognizes the right of indigenous peoples to give consent to things happening to our communities and to our peoples. and other conventions are not there yet. They are going into the right direction, but it's not sufficient. The UN has taken decisions on the rights of indigenous peoples, and the UN should indeed live up to those decisions, not just on paper, but in practice. And the UN are also the member states, right? So I think that all these things are so much linked together, but we need to actually live up to them. It's not a matter of just words. We have to live up, we have to build in monitoring, we have to build in mechanisms if someone does not live up to the standards, that you can actually have mechanisms to redress what has not been done correctly. That's the whole idea. I mean, if we keep doing business as usual, we will get results as usual. So let's think out of the box and let's start afresh, a better process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Max. I don't know if we have time. Well, we don't have time, perhaps. No time. Well, we still have, with those of you who are joining this afternoon, we have, spaces and places to talk and discuss. But let me thank the panelists, dear panelists, so we can applaud, perhaps. Yeah. Thank you, Max, for being online and following 2 days. And I think from all the moderators, all the panelists, we are grateful for the organizers, for the technicians that are up there, that are right here, for the interpreters, for convening our messages in different languages, and of course for the organizers of this great conference. Thank you. And I have a pleasure, of course, to share the printed version.
We would like to thank Kepin, Muhammad, Nicole, Max, who joined us online once again, and especially to Yuri for being the moderator of this last panel. So we're now concluding this international conference, and we would like to invite you to the closing ceremony. We would like to give the floor to Pilar Vicuña, coordinator of the Culture Program of UNESCO Santiago. Thank you very much, Yuri, and the panelists for this last session. I believe that all of us here were inspired to have new conversations and to see how to move forward. I would like to excuse our director, Esther Kuslayosh, that you were able to see because she was here yesterday and during the entire day, but she had to leave to Santiago. I would like to highlight some of the items that were addressed during these 2 days, and especially a cross-cutting topic for all panels. And it has to do with intersectoral work, collaborative work between ministries, public services, emergency teams, and heritage teams. We know, and I'm recalling some presentations, we know that we have different expertise. We come from different worlds. People that work in restoration and conservation is a different world from those working in risk prevention or emergency response. However, we need to cross those boundaries to be able to face the situation that we're currently facing in a better way. I also believe that this conference has shown us that there are similarities with the presentation of Danilo, Nuno, the parks that they manage. They're probably very different places, but it has similarities with Mongolia, the experience of Bhutan. I believe we are leaving this place glad to be able to have this instance where we can all share experiences that unite us from such different places and that call us to a quick and efficient response. I would also like to say that this guide, which is currently available online, we have some copies with us here today as well, reflect the effort and the commitment of UNESCO to provide specific tools for the work that you undertake, both for people here in the room and those listening to us online.
Our commitment is to be another player. I thank Nicole for what she said, that we should continue looking for a space such as this one. We will continue to do that, but also having documents, tools to provide technical assistance for the very valuable and important work that you do. And lastly, picking up the words of what Max said here from Suriname, invite us to think together, to think of new techniques, new ways, and not necessarily from the technological viewpoint, but inspire in what Juan Cruzanero today said from the Guatemaltecan community and the Chingu community in Brazil. And the knowledge is there, the tools are there. I believe that it is sufficient for us to get together in cases such as this to create partnerships and alliances and act where we are. Today, many people have traveled and they usually work in areas of cultural heritage, but others that come from institutions, they work with public policy. And I believe that that dialogue at different levels is essential in order to respond to the challenges related to fire in times of climate change. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone who traveled, thank the people from Valparaiso who were here these 2 days, and also the Heritage Service and the interpreters, the UNESCO team, the Municipal Corporation for Valparaiso, and the Multilateral Park of Valparaiso, my colleagues from UNESCO and other offices that traveled to support us. And also invite us so that in coming days, when some of us will be doing training where the entrance is limited, but nevertheless will help us to go gaining knowledge and tightening links between people with a common goal, that is, to preserve our cultural and natural heritage for many more generations. And with that, I now hand over to Krista Picat. And she will share a few words in closing from the UNESCO office in Paris.
I'm very happy to be able to connect and also follow the final panel of this important meeting. I would perhaps want to express on behalf of UNESCO our sincere gratitude to each one of you for your active engagement in these discussions over the last 2 days. Of course, our appreciation goes also to the government of Chile and the city of Valparaiso for hosting this important meeting. It was important for us to launch our fire risk management guide in the city of Valparaiso and in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean because of the fact that we feel that it's of special importance and actuality in this region. So it was also very insightful for us to hear your views and aspirations about how we can use this fire risk management guide to make sure that we have measures in place that allow us to better protect our heritage, to understand the fire and fire risks better, and also to take into consideration the resilience that is embedded in indigenous and traditional knowledge, often, of course, carried by women, transmitted to future generations by women, the essential role of communities as guardians of heritage, but also to hear your commitment to building this multi-sectorial approach. As many of the panelists also at the last session emphasized, we are operating in a multi-hazard and very complex environment. So, of course, fires are an important aspect to take into consideration, but it has to be put and contextualized in a larger context of global challenges of armed conflict, disasters, but also those crises that have been aggravated by climate change. So I think our message today is that the UNESCO Fire Guide is not the end, but only a beginning. And also, I would like to join the call of the panelists for action, for concrete plans, so that we can actually elevate our approach to the safeguarding of our common heritage to another level. Perhaps a few messages that I would like us to take away from our conference. First, as you reiterated, enhancing local capacity is essential. So we must really foster regional and local capacities and expertise. We must ensure that communities are heard, that they are engaged, but also empowered through the action. And the knowledge they hold that has been accumulated over generations is really indispensable for us to build a more resilient future. Second message is that solidarity and knowledge sharing is key in times of emergencies and crises. So any lesson learned in one region can provide valuable inspiration to other regions and institutions. So while we act and respond locally, we also have to take into consideration this global approach. Of course, the fact that we have to focus also on multi-sectorial and multi-level engagement. Building climate and disaster resilience requires joint efforts so that we can ensure that we have policy coherence and effective coordination in place between different sectors. How we leverage data, new technologies, local and national initiatives. These can all together only strengthen our efforts. And then, of course, we need to stay proactive, as many of the panelists underlined. When resources are limited, we need to start small, act locally, but begin immediately. So this is how we can make the difference. So thank you so much, dear experts, partners and colleagues. UNESCO has been at the front line, of course, alongside with many partners to safeguard heritage in emergencies. We also draw in our work, as we protect cultural heritage, we draw on our multi-sectorial approach, the fact that we also are the UN Agency for Culture Science, working on disaster risk reduction as a standard setter, clearinghouse, capacity builder, but also catalysts for international cooperation. So we remain deeply committed to support you in your national and local initiatives, both at policy but also operational levels. And I'm very sure and confident that through this conference and but also the forthcoming training, we have established a network for fire resilience in heritage. So as I said, you can count on UNESCO's continued support. We also will be counting on your action at the local and regional levels, so that we can together make sure that our collaboration on safeguarding our common heritage is fruitful. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Well, we thank each panelist for and the moderators for their participation, and we thank the authorities who were with us today, and especially the audience present here and everyone who was part of the conference over the UNESCO Santiago YouTube channel. This will be lodged in this same channel. And we also thank the Cultural Park for hosting the conference. I thank you all very much, and may you have a very nice day.